The system spoke in a James was just given a debilitating poison. This was the first time Arthur had poisoned him, and it was the most severe. He would be on guard against future poisons, but this time, his life was at risk.
Life at risk? I thought he wouldn't pass away.
Under normal circumstances, he wouldn't, because Lily would secretly sneak into the palace, enter the woodshed, and administer Master Ryan's elixir to him.
Master Ryan, it was thanks to this mentor in Nina's past life that she managed to escape danger multiple times.
Should we wait for Lily to come?
That could work.
So, Nina sat by the door, waiting for Lily to appear. After a long while, she didn't show up, but James's breathing became increasingly labored.
What's going on, system?
Oh no, Lily saw some movement in the woodshed and went to the kitchen next door.
What should we do?
Nina rolled her eyes. Without the protagonist's plot armor, if he perishes, who knows which twisted character she'll have to deal with next. Even having to deal with Arthur, the old man, is a possibility.
Host, you have a permanent reward from the last mission, 300 points. You can exchange them for an antidote recipe.
Exchange.
The system notified her that the purchase was complete.
How many points are left?
0.
Can I regret this? This debilitating poison spreads from the organs to the limbs, merges into the blood, and quickly soaks into the bones, like being corroded by acid. If it doesn't dissolve, it will break. Such a vicious poison, Arthur is truly a terrifying old man.
The antidote, however, is simple: dried ginger, licorice, poria, acaranthes, atractylodes, and epimedium mixed together. Isn't this just a remedy for osteoporosis? And it cost me 300 points.
Nina had the medicine, but he couldn't drink it at all. She thought for a moment, took a big gulp herself, then bent down to pass it to him mouth to mouth.
Host, you're so clever.
The system praised before falling silent again. Nina focused on feeding him, only to find that at some point, he had opened his eyes. He looked at her coldly, startling her.
I'm saving you.
He still didn't speak, staring at her with an indescribable complexity in his eyes.
You.
He suddenly moved, quickly placing a dagger against her neck, scaring her so much that she dropped the medicine bowl.
Where is this?
The woodshed, your room.
Is he poisoned to the point of confusion? James frowned, suddenly clutching his head and groaning.
This is the palace?
Nina nodded.
Then who are you?
I'm Arthur's daughter, Emily.
He was momentarily surprised, then tightened his grip on the dagger.
Emily has been gone for a long time. Who are you really?
Not knowing what was wrong with him, Nina quickly asked the system if his mind was damaged.
Host, the world energy is insufficient for a reset. It seems there are some issues.
What issues?
James's memory might not have been completely erased.
What?
Arthur's mouth fell open slightly, as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing.
Father. I felt like I was fading away just now, and in a daze, I seemed to dream of an immortal. He told me.
Nina, what did he say?
He said he sent a noble person to my side, named Mo. Only by having him constantly by my side will my condition improve.
Thankfully, Nina had a knack for making things up. Arthur held her hand in deep thought for a moment, then returned to normal.
Nina, don't worry, Father will find a way.
He indeed found a way, sending David one day and Michael the next to be her attendants. Nina had no choice but to pretend to sleep one night, disguise herself, and sneak out of the courtyard.
It's here.
Nina looked at the woodshed in front of her. This was James's home and the Duke's mansion. She knocked on the door, but there was no response. She pushed the door open and saw James lying motionless on the ground. On the surface, it seemed like James was feeding me harmoniously. In reality, he tormented me with an upset stomach for a whole day and night. Besides his torment, he had another hobby. He found out about my noblemen named Mo and made them his targets.
Nina, my zither strings all snapped.
My dog died with half a pastry in its mouth.
They came to complain. I thought it was a miracle they were still alive but promised to deal with James.
Didn't you say you were going to deal with me? I've sharpened the knife for you.
It was just a joke with them.
James put the knife away, but I lost a lock of hair. To protect my hair, I begged my father to send the nobleman away.
Host's favorability has increased by 5 points, now at 35.
For turbulent years passed. Then, I secretly visited a brothel, and the favorability dropped back to 35. Time passed, and the favorability remained stagnant. Everything depended on the upcoming meeting between the male and female leads. Despite James threatening to harm her, she still ordered a few attendants to carry him to the bridge. To be honest, James, who didn't know martial arts, was easy to deal with.
Host, you have quite the thick skin.
Thank you, I guess.
She dragged James into the crowd, noticing his forced smile. She was puzzled.
What were you thinking when you saw the fireworks?
He didn't reply. She figured he must be nervous about seeing his first love. Another firework exploded. Nina sniffed the air and immediately understood what he was thinking. Under the bridge was a burly man, arranged by Arthur years ago to watch over James. At 16, James was pinned under the bridge by this unsavory character. Luckily, the heroine arrived in time to save him a second time. This incident completely shaped his twisted personality and became the most humiliating memory he never wanted to mention in front of the heroine. After years of this training, Nina's body had become immune to all poisons. The firework just now was enough to knock out a 200-pound man, and now, only the two of them remained conscious on the bridge. She followed him step by step towards the bridge's underside, seeing his body tremble. Looking at the man on the boat who hadn't fully passed out, she asked.
Is it him?
She couldn't help but ask. He glanced at her in confusion, as if just remembering she was still there. He had no time to deal with her because he wanted to torment the man while he was still conscious. A dagger, sharpened to an extreme, pierced through the man's body. His eyes widened, and he staggered back, pleading for mercy. Earlier, my father had sent someone to fetch me for a change of clothes, probably to get me out of the way. My emotions were mixed. The words that once were just text to me now carried a heavy weight, and I could hardly imagine what James felt under the bridge back then. In the face of despair, turning dark was a form of self-protection. When he returned to me with hands stained red, his eyes were filled with sorrow.
Are you scared?
For some reason, his smile seemed bitter to me. I knew that if I said I was scared, his unstable emotions might lead him to harm me as well. I shook my head. He was stunned, perhaps by the sincerity in my eyes, or maybe he never thought he could show this side of himself to anyone. When I was Lily, he always carefully hid this side. I rolled up my sleeves, scooped a handful of water from the lake, and washed his hands thoroughly.
Do you think it's dirty?
No, I just think it's not appropriate to meet people with blood on your hands.
He was stunned again for a couple of seconds. After I carefully dried his hands, he suddenly grabbed my chin.
Emily, if I ever find out that you're lying to me, I will really kill you.
I know.
Listening to his dramatic words, I even found it somewhat amusing.
Let's go home. My back hurts.
His sudden change of attitude was astonishing. I glanced at both sides of the bridge, just about to say something.
Do you think I was joking about setting the fire?
He threatened in a low voice by my ear. I dared not stay any longer and immediately followed him home. The flower bridge caught fire that night, but there were no casualties, only a charred strong man under the bridge. Rumors of haunting spread, and the entire capital was in a state of panic.
Curious, could it be washing hands?
Nina brought various homemade hand sanitizers to his room and tried them all on James.
Playful, is this some new kind of fun?
Nina threw the handkerchief, feeling a bit deflated.
Frustrated, at this rate, when will I ever complete the strategy?
Seeing that Nina wasn't paying him any attention, James pulled her over. As she leaned lightly, he fell down with her.
Serious, I have a question for you.
What kind of question needs to be asked like this? Nina struggled a bit, but James was quite strong at the moment.
Whispering, go ahead.
Serious, you seem to know everything. The man under the bridge too, you seem to know who you'll encounter. You know my personality inside out, and, from the first time we met, you knew I could end you at any moment.
Nina sighed, realizing he had figured it out. If you keep giving him excuses today, he moved closer, his eyes fixed on Nina's, seeing through her panic.
You will end up like the man from yesterday.
Nina knew he was serious, and the system was playing dead at this critical moment. In this straightforward environment, life was like a play, and acting was everything.
Actually,
She scratched her face, trying to come up with a lie. James brushed her hair aside, his breath tickling her ear.
You have a habit of scratching your face when you're nervous, both last time and this time.
It took Nina a moment to process his words, and her eyes widened.
Could he mean what I think he means?
Host, he does mean that.
The system chimed in, pulling her back to reality. James looked at her panicked face and chuckled, releasing her. Only then did Nina realize he was bluffing. But she had fallen for it. Looking down, she saw that what he held was not a dagger but a banana. She felt a mix of emotions, unable to grasp his intentions.
From now on, you'd better stay by my side. Just as you said, you like me and want me to be your husband. Otherwise, no matter how you try to escape, I will make your life miserable.
After saying this, he closed his eyes and rested. The system suddenly notified Nina.
Host, his affection level has increased by 5, now it's 65.
After all this, he was secretly moved. Feeling speechless, Nina walked out of the room to get some fresh air. She was stunned to see two familiar faces approaching.
Let me introduce you. This is my daughter, Emily. Emily, these two are famous martial artists.
Hello, Emily. I'm Lily.
Ethan.
Emily stood there, unable to process their words. Was trouble finding her? She only caught a sentence about recent disturbances in the capital, and they were staying at the manor. Then, father was called to court. Emily led the two potential troublemakers around, trying to find a place James would never come. Until she heard a whistle and looked up to see James leaning against a tree. She forced a smile that looked worse than crying.
I recognize him. He spoke to me during the Lantern Festival.
Lily reminded Emily of what James had already figured out. Emily quickly found a place for the two troublemakers to stay. Surprisingly, James was well behaved and didn't say a word. When she took Ethan's luggage, she heard the system's notification of an affection level fluctuation, which scared her into dropping the luggage. James bent down, picked it up, and handed it back to her with a smile. Emily remembered the previous life when she married Ethan, and James, with disheveled hair, fought with Ethan. His eyes were red back then. She was worried he might harm Ethan in the middle of the night, so she found an excuse to stay in James's room overnight. James raised an eyebrow, looking at Nina standing with her arms crossed in front of the bed. She snorted.
I'm not leaving tonight. I'll watch you sleep.
James said nothing and started undressing. 1 piece, 2 pieces, until he was down to his last garment, he looked up and asked her.
Should I take this off too?
Nina was watching with great interest and swallowed hard.
Why are you asking me?
You seem to be enjoying the view.
He said this while only unbuttoning the last piece, and in her fluster, she couldn't help but sneak a peek. How could someone so delicate have abs?
Isn't it cold on the floor?
Yes, it is.
Why don't you come up to the bed?
No.
As Nina took off her boots and climbed onto the bed, she saw him looking at her with a teasing expression.
I'm here to keep a better eye on you.
Are you so afraid I'll hurt him?
He put on a hurt expression, making Nina's heart ache.
No, I just don't want you to harm anyone anymore.
Aren't you afraid?
Nina touched his hand, which was cold.
It's not fear, it's about protecting these hands.
He looked at her, puzzled.
I think such beautiful hands shouldn't be used for harm. That's why I need to watch over you.
The system's affection meter indicated that her words weren't in vain. She then fell into a sweet and peaceful sleep. It wasn't until the next morning, when Nina found the space beside her empty, that she realized something was wrong. Why couldn't his actions and thoughts ever align? She quickly dressed and started running. The people in the courtyard whispered as they saw her.
Not only has Miss recovered, but she seems even more energetic now.
Why are you running?
Ha ha. I'm rushing to save someone.
She answered while running, but when she saw who asked, her legs suddenly froze, and she almost tripped. James had no intention of helping her up, she knew she had touched a nerve.
You lied to me.
I didn't.
You said you didn't care about Ethan.
I don't.
James didn't want to argue with her and started walking towards Ethan's room. Nina cursed inwardly. With his current frail body, wasn't he courting disaster? Her attempts to stop him were futile, and Ethan greeted them from a distance. In her anxiety, Nina stomped her foot and pulled James into a kiss. She didn't know what he was thinking, but all she could think about was that she hadn't brushed her teeth. When they finally parted, everyone around them blushed, and Nina realized her behavior was inappropriate. Only James, now appeased, cheerfully greeted Ethan and then turned to leave, leaving the stunned crowd and Nina behind.
Host, what are you worried about? James's favorability is already at 80.
In everyone's eyes, James is the adopted son of the manor. Although we are not related by blood, today's actions.
Moreover, considering her father's attitude towards James, how could he possibly let her continue interacting with him? After much deliberation, Nina sneaked into James's room. If her father decided to take drastic measures, she wouldn't be able to protect him. To her surprise, as soon as she pushed open his door, she saw him sitting at the table, fully dressed, resting his chin on his hand, looking at her.
Why aren't you undressed?
Emily, did you come to my room in the middle of the night just to flirt with me? Though I wouldn't mind.
Nina wanted to close her eyes, but he shut the door instead.
Arthur is planning to make a move.
He pointed upwards, making Nina realize that there were eavesdroppers.
Maybe I should beg my father again.
It won't work.
He whispered a secret in her ear. The reason Arthur doted on her so much was because she bore a striking resemblance to his beloved Sophia, Arthur's mother. This was also why James didn't harm her the first time they met.
System. Check why I look so much like Sophia. Could it be that lovers in this world end up as siblings?
She only relaxed when the system denied it. It was just a trivial plot device. As a minor character, she hadn't put much thought into it, merely writing it as a similar appearance. Knowing the truth brought tears to her eyes. The person he cherished married another man, and now even her daughter, who resembled her greatly, liked that man's son. At first, Nina thought there was a 50% chance Arthur would harm him. Now it was a certainty.
So what should I do now?
She knew James must have a plan in mind, but she felt her intelligence was being fried in her head.
Whether I live or not depends on you.
He suddenly withdrew his hand, turned around, and sat on the bed with an indifferent look. Pleading with Arthur was useless. In this life, he didn't even know martial arts. Seeing his nonchalant attitude, Nina wanted to give up.
Wait, it all depends on me?
Looking up at the ceiling, an idea struck her.
Don't worry, I've checked the pulse. Twins. If my father drives you away, neither I nor the children will survive.
It seemed unexpected to him, and the people on the roof probably lost their balance, making rustling noises. Hearing this shocking news, if it wasn't spread all over the capital by tomorrow, Nina would be disappointed in these spies. Turning back to James, she saw his teasing expression, his lips slightly parted.
Wasn't this your idea? She gave him a glance and turned to leave.
Where are you going?
Back to sleep.
Shouldn't we make an effort?
Make an effort for what?
Twins.
Nina's face turned red. This perverted man with a bad back, twins might be the end of him. She returned to her room with a sense of accomplishment as the system reported.
85 points! Host, you are a genius!
System, when the day comes to go home, will someone pick me up or do I go back myself?
She began to imagine the day she could return home.
Host, once all tasks are completed, we will help you leave the body and cross the heavenly gate with me.
Nina thought about her life in the modern world, an orphan who worked hard to get into a traditional medicine program, only to pass away in the dormitory while writing a thesis. What a tragic fate! With such complex emotions, she fell asleep, and when she opened her eyes, the world had indeed changed. The palace was surrounded by gossipers, proving that no matter where you are, there are always people spreading news.
The Lord wants to see you.
Nina thought to herself, this is not good. If a doctor checks her pulse, won't she be exposed?
Host, you now have enough points to exchange for an illusion spell.
Use it!
Sure enough, Arthur sat in the middle with a displeased look on his face. As soon as Nina entered, he didn't speak to her, and the concubines all gave her dirty looks. The doctor who checked her pulse last time came again, and his face changed after feeling her pulse.
She's really expecting twins.
Arthur's mustache seemed about to fall off in anger.
You.
Pointing at Nina's face, he couldn't say a word for a long time and then stormed off. The concubines also said a few words to her before following him. For the next few days, they sent her herbal concoctions to prevent pregnancy, but she had already mastered the skill of identifying poisons. None of it entered her stomach. After Nina's relentless efforts, Arthur finally issued a document and held a family meeting. He announced that James' name would be removed from the family register, and he would no longer be the adopted son of the palace. Nina grinned.
If he's to get married, his name must be removed. So, the engagement was set.
Looking at James' faintly smiling face, Arthur nearly fainted from anger. The others in the household were quite happy because Nina had lost her virtue first and couldn't bring much dowry. Seeing the scheming smiles in the courtyard, Nina laughed foolishly along with them.
Host, sometimes I don't understand you.
Why make things difficult for myself? I just pretend they're blessing me.
So, on the wedding day, Nina wore the traditional bridal attire, feeling as if her last wedding was just yesterday. After the festivities, they entered the bridal chamber, but James wouldn't lift her veil.
Why won't you lift it?
Did you let Ethan lift it last time?
Nina thought for a moment and nodded. James turned to leave, and she quickly grabbed his arm.
It was lifted, but I lifted it myself. He went out to fight with you right after, so I lifted it myself.
James seemed satisfied with this answer and slowly removed the veil.
I always feel like wearing this outfit with you will lead to our demise.
Nina pouted, took off the clothes, and turned off the light.
Last time we perished together, you were holding me.
She felt a pang of sadness and gently placed her hand on him.
Are we just going to sleep like this?
What else? Is your back okay?
He flipped over, his eyes filled with desire, like a wolf disguised as a puppy suddenly questioned about its lineage. He proved with his strength that the back she had cared for all these years was perfectly fine.
You lied to me, saying your back hurt so you couldn't practice martial arts.
James kissed her tears with a wicked smile.
Martial arts are useless if they don't make you care for me.
The wolf Nina had cared for 5 years nearly took her life that night.
Are you a fairy?
Half asleep, Nina heard his whimsical question again, and it made her laugh.
I told you, no matter where you run, I won't let you go.
It seemed he had once said it would be a fate worse than death. The system's joyful announcement came, but Nina wasn't as happy as she had imagined. 9-5, just 5 points left, and she could go home. But what about James? What was he to her, and what was she to him? Save him, then abandon him. In the morning, sitting at the breakfast table, she was speechless. James ate while glaring at the neighbor's son who came to visit. The boy, only 11 or 12, came to get some wedding candy.
Is that necessary?
If she hadn't been standing there, James might have put some poison in the candy.
In the last life, you didn't like me. In this life, you liked me when you met me at 12.
So he suspected she had a preference for young boys? Nina punched him hard.
Honey, my back hurts.
He whimpered, but Nina wasn't falling for it anymore. By the afternoon, she heard from the neighbor that, following her husband's advice, she found a job for her son. Nina pouted, thinking it best to keep him away from children in the future. Nina found James a job at the Eastern factory, dealing with chemicals. He was surrounded by eunuchs, and it was a state-owned enterprise. One evening, as he returned home with a newly made potion, he took her pulse and immediately threw the potion 3 feet away.
Are you?
Nina wasn't surprised. In this era without precautions, given his efficiency, it was quite normal. But James wasn't acting normal. His affection for her skyrocketed that day, almost getting her sent back. In the end, the system took pity on Nina and granted her a 10-month leave. To minimize the emotional pain for both of them, Nina tried to lower their affection levels, but it was futile. Affection only increased, never decreased. After 10 months of hesitation, just as she was about to ask the system to let her stay, she was overcome by a wave of pain and passed out. As the baby was born, Nina was abruptly sent back to the modern world.
System, please, give me another chance.
In the empty room, accompanied only by endless papers and a job she couldn't find, Nina realized that perhaps another time and place was where she truly belonged. So, she continued down the path of self-destruction. Finally, on the 3rd day of her hunger strike, she heard that familiar voice again.
Host, there are no more bodies available for you.
But, you can use your own body. However, once you go, there's no coming back. Go.
You are the most decisive host I've ever seen. This time, I won't accompany you. Take care, host.
The system bid me farewell confidently, but I realized I forgot to ask one crucial question.
What time is it now?
After wandering in strange attire for 3 days and nights, I finally knocked on the door of the Eastern Depot.
I'm looking for James.
The eunuch at the door looked at me with disdain, covering his nose. I stood at the entrance, waiting proudly for him to announce my arrival, but all I got was,
Throw her out.
I sat at the gate of the Eastern Depot, wiping my tears. When I looked up, I saw James looking at me as if I were a stray dog. Feeling uneasy under his gaze, I scratched my face instinctively.
Are you leaving this time?
No.
Oh.
He turned to leave, and I grabbed his leg. He bent down to pick me up, and I felt delighted, thinking he still cared about me. But when we got home, he took out handcuffs, and I realized something was wrong.
Isn't this a bit too much excitement for a homecoming?
He cuffed my hands and then opened the door to let in 2 little kids.
Daddy, is this our mommy?
Isn't Mommy supposed to be a fairy? Why does she look like a beggar?
Is this really necessary?
He gave me his first smile.
Absolutely.
In the end, he did unbind me because I couldn't give him a proper back massage with my hands cuffed. I had been away for 5 years, and I felt a bit emotional.
Being a single father isn't easy, even your back is a bit crooked. By the way, I heard Ethan and Lily had 4 boys. Lily really has it tough.
When I noticed him staring intently at me, I realized I was in trouble and tried to run. But he quickly immobilized me and fed me something unknown.
Hold this pill in your mouth, my dear. I'll make sure you understand everything. Is it that she has it tough, or that you have it too easy?